Hi there, everyone. I just need to clear up a couple of things before I begin. First of all, I am not any kind of actual scientist. I have been a performer, a writer, a game designer, many things. I have done a lot of science communication in terms of comedy about science, and for the purposes of that, I used to call myself a scientician, which is a word I made up so I wouldn't get sued under the Trade Descriptions Act. So that's one thing I need to clear up. I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to be talking about science tonight. I also just want to clear up, in case there's any confusion, I'm not that Ben McKenzie. And the other one, I do get fan mail for the more famous Ben McKenzie because he doesn't have his own website. And it's mostly young boys saying, hey, I want to be Robin on Gotham. Can you get me on there? I'm like, no, I can't do that. So that's me. Now, I said I've been a lot of different things. One of the things I've been is a game designer, and I really started out doing game design with a company that I helped to create called Pop-Up Playground. I created with mostly two other people. There were a lot of other people involved. Robert Reed, who's a theatre maker, mostly a director and a playwright. He's now a critic as well. And Sarah from Lothian, who's a fantastic craft artist. She makes a lot of sets, she's done puppetry, she does a lot of guerrilla and public art. And together we decided we would make games because we all loved games. And the things that I brought to the table were kind of really nerdy knowledge about how games work. We're all role players, we all love role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of thing. And we had a real passion for wanting to bring that kind of thing into the real world. And a key part of our practice is we felt that play is a thing that adults should be doing, and that we are all taught as we grow up that that's something for kids, so we leave play behind. So we wanted to make games that adults would play, and mostly they were live games, which means, and one of the problems about working in this field is there are no good words for what we did. I would say I was a game designer, and people would go, you mean video games, right? And I'm like, no. In fact, I recently had my first video game that I worked on published in April, and I was very excited because now when people say, oh, you mean video games? I can say, yes, and some other things. And then they'll go, oh, like board games? Like, no, games that you play in person. So it's really easy. It's much better if I just explain by showing you some pictures. We made games where you got chased by creepy clowns. We made games where you told ghost stories in the library. This was part of the very first White Night Festival in Melbourne. We were supposed to come back the next year. I'm not bitter that it didn't happen. And we made games where you were Vikings being picked by the Valkyries to see who would win in the battle. We made a choose-your-own-adventure version of Julius Caesar based on the Shakespeare play with the assistance of Bell Shakespeare that happened in the streets of Melbourne. People split up into teams. They supported Brutus or Caesar depending on their actions and the choices they made. There were 7 different endings that game could have. We ran it 4 times as a development season, and we had to invent a new ending on the fly because people never do what you expect in these things. It's just the truth of all game design, okay? But we were doing all of this, and we thought, you know, this is great. Like, we love doing these pop-up things. We love doing things out on the streets. We love getting into a theater. But wouldn't it be great if we had a home, like somewhere we could call our own, if Pop-Up Playground didn't have to pop up all the time, but could have a permanent place? And we had a plan for this because while we were doing this, some other form of play got really popular. And I'm talking, of course, about escape rooms. Has anyone here, who's here has played an escape room? Anybody? Yeah, a few escape room fans in the audience. Of course, it's nerd night. What did I think would happen? Anyone here not know what an escape room is? Anybody? Yeah, okay, there are a few. Okay, so just to recap real quick. In an escape room, you go into a room and you are locked in and you cannot leave until you solve a series of puzzles, each more fiendish than the last. It's not... Look, that's basically what it is. And people are surprised that this is a thing. But it totally is a thing, right? It is a thing. And your typical escape room looks something like this. It's a room. It's decked out with some sort of theme. The most popular themes, if you ever read about this, the 2 most popular themes are detective and spy. I'm sick of detective and spy escape rooms. But you go in, it's got a whole bunch of props and stuff, and you look around the room for clues, all right? Sometimes you get given a starting point, sometimes you're not. But you go and you have a look around for clues. And in this room, for example, I would be, and I don't know this room, this is just a random picture of one I found on the internet, but I would suggest look for things that are printed backwards because there's a mirror in the room. There's a phone there. You're probably going to find a phone number that you need to call where you're going to speak to someone or hear a recorded message. There's a phonograph. Definitely look through those records. One of them is going to play and give you some interesting clues. And this is one of the things about traditional escape rooms is that they very much reward people who've played other escape rooms, right? There are standard kinds of puzzles that you find in them that you need to solve. And when I say you have to solve a puzzle and find clues, basically, usually, most of the time, what you are finding in an escape room is some sort of code, a sequence of numbers or letters that you then use to open one of these guys. Right? And if you've ever played an escape room, you know that usually there are a lot of combination locks involved. And this is how the game progresses. It's a sequence. So you find the clues, you solve the first puzzle, you get a sequence, you use it to open a lock, you open a new section of the room or a new container, there's a new clue, you go on, you find the next one and the next one and the next one in sequence until you get out of the room. You are never, just to be clear, ever really locked in, okay? I'm sorry to burst your bubble there, but it's true. OH&S doesn't allow it. Now, they're not always actual padlocks like this. Sometimes there are very elaborate bits in escape rooms. I found this is one of my favorite examples, a weird collection of colored light globes that you have to get to light up in the right sequence. Or this might actually also be a clue. You could have something like this where you have to watch them for the sequence. So sometimes they're quite elaborate. But oftentimes, the theme of the room, where you have, your kind of lovely Victoriana, and the actual things that happen in the room, don't really go together. Like, why does Sherlock Holmes have a series of Scrabble tiles hidden around his room that you then have to form into a word and use the numbers on them as a code to open a padlock? It doesn't make any sense, right? And most escape rooms are like that. Now, that doesn't mean they're not good, all right? They're a lot of fun. I love them, right? And in fact, in Melbourne, we have some of the best in the world. Melbourne has, and in fact, Australia, and Sydney also is a great hub for this, has a great thriving industry of independent escape rooms, by which I mean a lot of the big names, a lot of the big chain ones, you actually buy an escape room, essentially kit, and then put it together. And you can personalize it a bit and customize it a bit, but the puzzles are all pre-made for you. But in Australia, we have a lot of people who are making their own out of love. They really love it. They still run it as a business, but they design their own. And look, sometimes, though, they can be quite stressful, right? But they are fun. They are fun. And we at Pop Playground, we want to make something like that, but we don't want to just do that, because we had this obsession. We wanted to take the experience of a role-playing game where you get to pretend you're someone else, be somebody else, and this escape room idea where you went into a room where you were completely immersed in the game. Because this is like a buzzword in game design, right? Immersion. People are always talking about, oh yeah, it's an immersive game. And when they're talking about a video game, generally that's just not true. Like, you're still sitting in your lounge room and the TV is over there. We wanted to make a game that was truly immersive in the sense that you were in the game. It was all around you. You could easily lose yourself in it and believe that it was real, but in a safe way. And we got an opportunity to do that. We got a building in Preston. The council up there in Preston wanted to revitalise the area, so they were giving arts grants and trying to get artists into empty buildings to do interesting stuff. And the building that we got the option to get into just happened to have been once a bank. Now, it hadn't been a bank for ages. In fact, it had been empty for about 2 years, and even before that, it had actually been, after it was a bank, a private investigation and private security firm. But that gave us the idea to make a game about robbing a bank called Small Time Criminals. Now, we use the phrase constantly, do you want to rob a bank? I even use it as the title for this talk, but in fact, it was not a robbery, it was a burglary, and this is an important distinction, especially when talking to journalists, as I discovered. I did an interview with an age journalist who I won't name because, frankly, I've decided to forget her name on purpose. She was very mean because she interviewed us and then went and found someone who thought it was a terrible idea on purpose and did a real hatchet job on us, if I'm honest, because they were like, you're glorifying violent crime. And so we had to be very clear, no. This is about, this is a burglary, right? We're going to be sneaking into a bank in the middle of the night, and it's like Ocean's 11, right? It's a fantasy bank robbery where nobody gets hurt and only bad people lose their money, right? So we took the bank and we designed it to look like a sort of slightly old, like 80s kind of establishment that hadn't changed for a long time. We set up all these desks inside the bank. Every desk had a character who worked at the bank. We had actors who played those characters. We have photos of them. We did little videos. And every character had a story. And so we decked out the whole place. We had set designers. We did props. We did everything. And then when you arrived at the bank, we're like, okay, well, you have to arrive and you have to get put into character straight away. So when you arrived, you had an experience like this. You here for a bank job? Come in. Right, so from the get-go, I mean, who is that devilishly handsome man? But From the get-go, or some of the other guys, Kevin Turner, who was my co-game designer, we did the game design on the game. Other people did the set design and the narrative, but we did the game design. We decided that from the moment people arrived, we would be in character. And the plot of the game basically was that, okay, these guys are a corrupt, awful investment bank. We're going to steal money from them, but actually we're really here to steal one item in particular. That's the reason we've been hired, but we don't want to get caught. So I'm organizing the job, and I found you. Just a regular bunch of people who have all the skills necessary to pull off a burglary, but you've never done this before, so no one will ever suspect you, particularly if you make it look professional, right? So we would brief you in the corridor. That's one of the existing security cameras. I'll come back to those in a minute. And then you would go inside the bank where it was decked out to look like it was nighttime, all right? So we lit it. It was very dark, but we lit it with blue lights so it looked like cinema nighttime, Hollywood night. Which is to do with the rods and cones in your eyes, but I'm not a scientist, so I'm not allowed to talk about that. Okay, so it's true, look it up. Okay, anyway, so you had torches, you went in with torches, it was very dark, and the whole place made sense, right? You never had to find Scrabble tiles and put them together. You didn't have to listen to weird, no, I can't say that's a spoiler, but you didn't have to listen to weird noises in the bank in order to decipher a code that let you open a padlock, because that wouldn't make sense. No real person would ever do that. And this was not meant to be that abstract a game. This was meant to feel real. So instead, you'd look around people's desks, you'd find weird keys, not be sure what they were for. And the whole time you were doing that, I, or whoever was playing your contact for the job, was talking to you over the walkie-talkies, giving you advice and answering questions. And this was something else that we wanted to do to make it feel different from a standard escape room. Now, in every escape room, somebody's watching you over the cameras to make sure that you're safe and you're not injuring yourself or breaking any of the stuff that cost them a lot of money and time to put together to make the escape room. Because even then you put signs up that says, this is not part of the game, people will pull it off the wall looking for clues. We had a disclaimer recording that played beforehand, and it specifically said things like, don't play with any safety equipment, don't climb on any furniture. And the number of people who were like, oh, so people must have done all that stuff. And we're like, yeah. Anyway, so it happens. Anyway, so we did that, and we're watching you for safety. But in a standard escape room, if you're asking for help, it's seen as a failure for you to solve the clues. And in some escape rooms, ones that, I'll be honest with you, I don't like this about some escape rooms, they're quite harsh on you for for needing help, right? They're not very friendly. They're like, we're going to dock you 5 minutes because you needed 3 hints. And you're like, well, but, I'm trying to have a fun game here. So we made it part of the game that you had to talk to the person on the walkie-talkie. And the interesting thing about that was that people who'd never played an escape room before were bang into that. They were like, yeah, I'll talk to our guy who's on the walkie-talkie and knows about crimes. I'll talk to that guy. And people who'd played escape rooms before were like, we're not talking to him. We don't need any hints. Just screw that guy. So what we did was he built a tutorial into the game. This was the object that you had to retrieve, a battered old box that was locked with a padlock. This was the object that we actually wanted to steal for the purposes of our job. And then you had to steal as much valuable stuff as possible, which was how you were going to get paid for the job and how to make it look professional. So you had to get this first, and that meant that you had to follow my instructions, or whoever the other agent was, to get in there, and that sort of helped you learn the way the game worked. You'd look through the window of the manager's office and see weird things. We put a lot of weird stuff in there because they weren't just corrupt, they were frankly supernaturally evil. This was a statue to Dagon, if I remember rightly, so if there are any Lovecraft fans in the audience, you already know something's wrong. Now, as well as going into the bank and having to find keys and find clues and figure out how to find all the valuable objects, we also wanted to make sure it was super interactive. So we had 2 actors working the job. There was me, or whoever it was, being your agent, and then we had a security guard. And the security guard started upstairs because it was a 2-floor building, and then when they came downstairs, we instructed the players they had to hide in the manager's office so that they didn't get seen, which meant they usually got under a desk, right? And this is basically an excuse to get full-grown adults to play hide and seek. And it was brilliant. People said this was one of their favorite parts of the game, right? Because they hadn't done this since they were a kid. And also they were in a scenario where they didn't know the person looking for them, but they also knew, we're robbing a bank and this guy's a security guard. We could get in trouble. They know it's not real, but in the moment, they acted like it was real. And people loved this, right? They said, yeah, my heart was racing. I thought I was going to die. I was like, well, you weren't really. No, in a good way. Okay, good. We only ever had to fill out 3 forms for accidents. We were pretty lucky. So that happened, and then you look around for clues. There were documents. This one was on one of the characters' desks. Sally had a few problems. One of them was that her co-workers were bullying her. They had locked her in the vault because the bank had a real bank vault. In fact, it had 2 of them. And so she had sent around these instructions about how to open the vault because, everyone forgot how to open the vault. She didn't get that they locked her in on purpose. And then she got in trouble because it's like, you can't send this around. You've got to delete the original, which was a big clue that, okay, we've got to get into her computer. So we had computers set up on all the desks. They were running Linux. We did that on purpose so that we had a great friend of ours, Matt, who put that all together for us. We did that so that it was familiar, but not the same as what people would know. So it wasn't Windows or a Mac, but it was similar enough that they could figure it out. Sally also had a bit of a drug problem. If you got into a locked drawer, you could find a Bible that was hollowed out and had cocaine in it. This was the vault door upstairs. It's a real bank vault door. The room itself is like steel enclosed. It's got a little shutter at the side there for letting oxygen in and out. It was one of the only places that the actual built-in security cameras didn't reach, so we had to put in a webcam in there. And there were also no power points in there, so we had to put a generator in the corner of the room. And at least 3 or 4 teams did try and steal the generator, which caused us no end of trouble. But this gives you an idea of what the lighting was like. So that's lighting on the left, that's like with normal kind of lights on. This on the right is what it looks like at night time. We made up all these fake signs. The name of the bank was Eureka Futures, because they were an investment bank, and super evil. One of people's favorite parts of the game was opening the vault, because that's where most of the valuable stuff was. And that, as the contact, I was always urging them, look, you've got to get in the vault. That's where all the expensive stuff is. And once they figured out the code and they opened it up, it was great. We found some people found it a lot easier to open a bank vault than others. For example, bank staff. We actually had a few groups of bank staff come along. And anyone who went to a high school that had lockers, surprisingly enough, were really good at it. Some people were not good. When you open it up, one of the best things we ever put in the game, lasers. That's not a great photo. It's really hard to take photos of a game that's completely in the dark. This is a much better photo. You can't get... Now, if you know anything about lasers, you know that they don't look like that unless there's something for them to light up. So every day when we were setting up the game, in fact, usually 4 or 5 times a day, because you have to reset the game in between people playing it, which means you have to go put all the bits of paper back on the tables. You've got to put all of the stuff that they stole. Like, we were idiots. We made an escape room where you were supposed to collect things and take them out of the room. So we had to have like 15 minutes reset time for 2 of us to run around, put everything back in. But we filled the vault with smoke, with a smoke machine before each game so that you could see the lasers. It was much more fun that way. Occasionally we'd have teams who had annoyed us or had played before, so we put them on hard mode and we did not fill it with smoke. They could not see the lasers. They had to find something to mist the lasers with themselves, which we did also leave in the bank as a backup plan. We had lots of fake treasure, so there was fake diamonds that looked really good even though they're made of plastic. We had fake money. This is the actual design for the fake money in the bank. It had an emu on it because the bank manager character was obsessed with the emu wars. And if you don't know what they are, they're real. Google them. You're going to love it. She was obsessed with them and thought the emus were coming back to kill us all. So that was a theme in the game. We had lots of other treasures. What happened when you got to the end of the game, you'd come out with all the treasures you collected in a bag that we gave you at the start. We'd tally them up and tell you how much money you'd made. Now, you could get caught by the security guard. People often said, you can't get caught, can you? And we're like, yeah, absolutely you can. Lots of teams got caught. And what would usually happen is I would intervene and say, okay, I'm going to bribe the guard. And depending on how annoying they'd been to the guard, I would bribe the guard $500,000 or $1 million, and that would come out of their cut. So they basically still could complete the game, but they would get a score penalty. So this was another game design decision we made. It wasn't about how fast are you going to get out of the room. It wasn't about could you solve the puzzles. It was about what are you deciding to do? Because we put more stuff in the bank than you could possibly steal in the hour of time that you had. And you could play with up to 6 players. It was usually best with 3 or 4, but some teams of 6 did really well. Actually, we found usually teams of 5 or 6 did much worse than 3 or 4 player teams. And you had to decide what you were going to concentrate on. Where do we think the valuables are? What do we think is valuable? We can't take everything. What are we going to take? And so you were trying to get the best score. And we did get some people come back and play again. And that was good because we were not a standard escape room. And being the non-standard escape room style thing, because we weren't really an escape room, was good. Because a lot of people liked it, they really loved it, they gave us great reviews and they wanted to come. But unfortunately, it also had its downside because we found it very hard to maintain being profitable and actually making enough money to stay open. Partly that was because the standard escape room plan is to have 3 or 4 rooms in one building with a bar. So people come, they hang out, they play a game, and then they come back another time, they play another one. And also you can have 3 or 4 teams going at once and only need 1 or 2 people to oversee them. We had 1 game, so we'd only have 1 team at a time. And we needed 2 actors. so we had more rent and we had more people that we had to pay for. So it was quite an expensive escape room style thing to run. And we found that we just weren't getting enough people. So we decided we had to close it after a year, and we did. But I will say that it's one of the best things I've ever been involved in, and I sincerely hope that even though we've closed Pop-Up Playground now, we're not still a going concern, I certainly do hope to make another one sometime in the future. And this is what it looked like when we closed up. I'm still in the vault to this day. Thank you very much.
Go to nerdnight.com to find a Nerd Night event near you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for our latest presentation.